seemingly going to be, well, I thought I had a hanky to wipe off with. There we go. I was going to say this is going to be one of my wetter days, and I was like, oh no, it's going to be wetter than I thought. Woo! Well, welcome. I'm going to teach a class later about how to begin sermons. Glad to see you. Glad for everybody who's here live with us and for everybody who's in Facebook land. If you ever want to be here live with us, we have Bible hour at 10 o'clock, and that's for kids and teens and adults, and also our main meeting here beginning at 11. We also have a small group meeting at 6:30 on Wednesday nights. You're welcome to join us there. We invite you to do that. Well, I had a new experience in my life this Friday. For the first time, I think it's the first time, unless I was a kid and I've forgotten it, got to go to a drag race. And, as many of you may know, and some of you may not, my dad is a huge car guy. I grew up in his mom and dad co-owned the Ford garage in their small town, and so he knew everything about cars. And then there's my sons who big and gung-ho for cars, and there's me in the middle. I drive one sometimes. But Molly's husband, Greg, drag races, and I've always wanted to go to one over the years and see what he does, and we had the opportunity to do that, and that was awesome, really a fun experience for us. And of course, took my family and also took the twins, and the boys were going back and forth about. And I was going to write down a lot of technical details. I don't even know the technical details to shout out there. Like, well, is this kind of engine and this kind of intake, and what if it's this? And I haven't seen Greg's car. Is it going to be this or this? And when it came down to it, I was like, I think Greg's is the pretty orange Mustang. That's what I knew. But he did end up winning 3 out of 3 races, so good for him. I don't know what happened Saturday. He was racing Saturday as well. But Friday, when we were watching, 3 out of 3 races he won. And I did get the chance to observe all that went into making this car do its amazing things. And it was fun to go between races and got to go check out Greg doing his thing. He had his laptop out and was taking data that was collected during the race and then tweaking little things. Again, I have no technical information to give here. Tweaking various settings on his car to make it run better on the next race. But the whole team was working together. He's doing his thing. His mother's bringing over an external hard drive, and he's calling across to a buddy, talking, and then. Of course, then even Raiden was running back and forth, being a courier of messages and information and that sort of thing. And I thought, the drag racer itself was not the only well-oiled machine there that day. Everybody was doing their part. And we also had the experience of, obviously seeing the power and the speed displayed before us. It was amazing. We were sitting right beside for the most part, I was sitting right beside the finish line. So you're seeing these things at the very fastest they're going. And of course, they're shaking you as they go by. But every few races, there would be one that just speeds past you. And then one would have gotten some sort of problem as it was starting. And they would have had this big burnout at the beginning, make sure their tires would grab the racetrack wheel. They'd shown off all that they could do. And then one would just shoot off, and the other would put down the rest. And so all of these parts had to work together. All of them had to do their job. But every once in a while, something goes wrong. Most likely, it's something that's unforeseen, that sort of thing. But I had this image of everybody has to do what their part, or this whole experience doesn't work out. Well, the title for today's message is Truth and Consequences, Avoiding the Tragedy of Missed Opportunities. Again, truth and consequences, avoiding the tragedy of missed opportunities. We've been talking about, as we've been going through the Gospel of John, the opportunities that were there for, especially we single out the Jewish Christian, or the Jewish leaders as they are observing Christ, and they're falling. Jesus doesn't match what they expect. And they have this opportunity to lead the people of Israel and see Jesus and acknowledge him and worship him. But instead, because they're so wrapped up in their own ideas, they end up missing this opportunity and opposing Jesus. Well, I want to go back and trace this picture before we end up back at we are on the day of the crucifixion. And I want to back up and go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Now I won't do a full survey of the Old Testament, but I want to give a little bit of the timeline here, just a little of the history, to paint the tragedy that we are going to observe as we see Jesus moving into his trial and his eventual crucifixion. In verse 26 of Genesis 1, it says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.' So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth.'" And so we see man being made in the image of God. He is representing God on earth. God is the ruler, and then man and woman are vice regents under him over this good world. And look, it says, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it." Creation is good in the way that God made it, but God made it in such a way that there is something for mankind to do. There is a task to be performed. They are to subdue the earth and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. We are to join in God's work. We are to participate. And this would have been done in a way that's joyful and fulfilling. Its work existed before the fall, but it was something that we were joining with God in. It was something that was beautiful and good, designed to experience and enjoy the glory of God. But we know in the fall, we've heard this story many times, but think of the imagery involved here. We know that Satan is behind the serpent, but the way the story presents it is the serpent being this wily creature of the approaching Eve. And look at how he turns things upside down. It's supposed to be God, and then man and woman ruling over this world together, ruling over the creatures. Then comes this serpent. The serpent tells the woman the lie about God. And the man, instead of being a backstop, instead of being a corrective, he just gives in, and he participates in the sin himself. And they both sin against God. So we've taken this God, humanity, the living creatures, flipped it. The living creature is wanting to be the leader, telling the man and woman what to do, and the man and woman picturing God in the way that the serpent has told them to picture him. So there's this world that is turned upside down. Then we get through the flood of Noah. And in the aftermath of that flood, we see the Tower of Babel incident. People are supposed to, again, mankind is supposed to spread out and fill the earth. But they refuse to do so. They want to remain. And they together build this tower to reach heaven. And of course, God confuses the languages, and they are forced to then go out. So they can understand each other. They spread out. And when they spread out, they end up rejecting the true God, and they end up following after other gods. They're worshiping the host of heaven. And that leads then to these, you see these nations, these various nations, serving false deities. And God brings out Abraham. And he's just someone from Ur. And he calls him out, and God makes his own nation in the midst of all of these rebellious nations. And he chooses them out for his own. And on down the timeline, he puts his own special presence there. He's living amongst his people in the Holy of Holies, in the tabernacle. But even in this beautiful environment, with God in the midst, telling them how to live their lives, meant to be a city on a hill, meant to be showing the nations what God is like, we see them pursuing after other gods. We see them being unfaithful. And eventually we see the nation split, and we see the north defeated, we see the south defeated, we see the Babylonian captivity. They're taken away. And even then, God has mercy and brings them back. Jerusalem's walls are rebuilt. A temple is rebuilt. And then we see them have trouble with other Gentile kingdoms. We see them under Greece, and we see them under Rome. We see some heroes of the faith in these time periods, but we also see rebellion. And they are not this nation that is successfully serving God with all its heart and experiencing blessings. And then we come to the time period where Jesus comes on the scene. When we come to this time period, the Jews are not so much struggling with idolatry anymore. As we look in the Old Testament, that's usually what's happening, is they are going after these other gods, and the prophets are calling on them to be faithful to Yahweh. Well, now they are faithful in name to Yahweh. They're known for being these monotheists in this polytheistic world. But when Jesus comes and when his ministry begins, he finds himself being opposed by the religious leaders of his day because their religion has become something of, yes, we worship Yahweh, but we have a very particular understanding of what Yahweh is like. We will worship Yahweh as we see him, and if you don't match our picture, you therefore are not of Yahweh. I've thought about a way to translate this into our own setting, and I think it's like, what if your favorite news channel, your favorite Christian podcaster, your favorite biblical scholars, and then John and I are all telling you, hey, this guy's a creep, stay away. If you're the common Jewish guy, that's sort of what you're hearing. All of these figureheads of your faith that you practice are telling you, no, 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 stay away. This is how far from God's will much of the Jewish faith in name has gone. And so this brings us back then to John 18. Back to this idea of the upside down. We have this the serpent deceiving the woman, the man following her into sin, and them both, of course, sinning against God. Well, in John chapter 18, beginning in verse 28, we ended with this section last week. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusations do you bring against this man?" They answered him, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." The Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So back to this idea of the upside down. The Jews are meant to be this people that stands out separately from the rest of the nations, showing them what God is like. And if you are a leader of the Jews, you are meant to lead them in this. But here, we find these leaders rejecting God in the flesh, living among them. Rejecting them, and not only rejecting them, but using the Gentile power to get the result that they want. See how far they've come. They're meant to be the leaders of the people who are showing the light to the Gentiles. And instead, they as the leaders are co-opting a Gentile to get the death of the man that they hate. This is how far they have come. So before we go further, just a little bit of background on Pilate. We won't spend a lot of time here, but to put in perspective of what kind of a person he is. He's in his position of power of governor because of his relationship with Aelius Sejanus as the consul. And this powerful man who's got him his position here, he ended up plotting against Emperor Tiberius, and he's caught and he's executed by this time. So Pilate's already got a little bit of an association with a dangerous association with someone having been opposed to Caesar, to Tiberius, Emperor Tiberius. And specifically, when Sejanus was executed, Tiberius also sent out a decree to cancel Sejanus's policies that were anti-Jewish, and specifically it refers to the atrocities against the Jews. Sejanus was known for his evil towards the Jews, so bad that Tiberius is having to send out an edict saying, no, you've got to stop this. And Pilate himself had already had two separate incidents where the Jews, he had gotten on the wrong side of the Jews, and there had been riots and been trouble with the Jewish people. One involved him taking money from the temple treasury to fund an aqueduct, and another, he got in trouble with them for displaying Roman military standards. It would have been offensive to the Jews. So he's associated with a very heavily anti-Jewish person who has been opposed by Caesar, who has been executed by Caesar, or under Caesar's authority. And he's also had these run-ins with the Jews, so he's in a precarious situation. And the Jews, you know they're aware of the politics. He's a guy that is just ripe for them to use. Again, just that, looking back at that, be a light to the Gentiles? No. We can make use of this Gentile to get what we want. Because, again, we are opposed to this man presenting himself as Yahweh. He can't be Yahweh's man because he's not like us, therefore. Remember, they're placing themselves at the center of what truth is. And afterwards, after these events later on, Pilate would end up committing atrocities against the Samaritans, and he would be recalled to Rome. And on his way back to Rome, Tiberius dies, and then as far as reliable history, we lose track of Pilate. Not really sure what happens, but Pilate continues this reactionary. He's prone to violence against these people who are other than him. So let's move on then. Jesus has been turned over to him by the Jews. In verse 33, so Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Now John doesn't include this, but the Jews have put this forth. This is one of the offenses they're bringing him before Pilate for claiming to be the Christ, the king. So, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from the world." Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him. But you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" They cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas!" Now Barabbas was a robber. And this word in the Greek for robber, it's a general word for a robber, but it can also be used as someone who is an insurrectionist. And the relation there is that they're a robber of the public, this sort of idea, a social robber, a rebel. And Barabbas has been jailed because he has participated in an insurrection that also resulted in murder. So here Jesus is being paraded as this dangerous man, and he's not. But Barabbas is the one they're asking for to be released in his place, who really is this dangerous person. Again, this upside-down theme that you will see coming over and over again. We want to go back and examine what Jesus has said here. And we'll, for our main points this morning, we'll work with what Jesus does in this divine opportunity for witness before this powerful ruler, and then also Pilate and the Jews and their missed opportunities. Jesus says, when he's asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" I find this really interesting. It's just he does this a few places in this passage where it's just a short little statement, and it really digs in at you. And Pilate's response is interesting. He's like, "Am I a Jew?" You're like, "Why would I know about this? Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you over to me." But Jesus is presenting Pilate with the opportunity for him to contemplate Jesus' kingship. Are you the king? Well, do you you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me? He presents the possibility that Pilate could have been contemplating Jesus and his role and who he was apart from this event. That's a clever way to go about getting into Pilate's head. He's expanding the way that Pilate is thinking, especially when he goes to be asked about his kingdom. "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews, but my kingdom is not from the world." So he's talked about, hey, this conversation could have already been including you. Jesus is a public figure. You could have spent your time thinking about me. My kingdom is not from this world. So he's pointing to a reality beyond this world and his own authority in that realm. And then he goes beyond even that to say, "You say that I'm a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world." I'm an invader, basically. I've come into the world to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. So he's gone, this can involve you. There is more than this authority structure that you're part of. I'm in charge of it. And in fact, if you care about truth, if you're really pursuing the reality behind it all, you're in fact pursuing me. First point this morning is, be aware of opportunities for directing people's attention deeply inward and infinitely outward. Again, be aware of opportunities for directing people's attention deeply inward and infinitely outward. Unleash them from the shackles of the everyday. We think about our common culture. There are so many things that are working against us to keep us trapped in the sun up, sundown cycle. Get up, go to work, pay the bills, seek some sorts of pleasure in there somewhere. If we look at the social media, you can go down a route of establishing a very rich and posh and incredibly shallow life, seeking to find some sort of satisfaction for this meat sack that you find yourself in. And it's not going to fulfill. But society tosses these things our way, whether that be social media, whether that be sex, whether that be power, whether that be drugs, whether that be alcohol, so many things. We can go into, it's okay to enjoy Star Wars, but if you're spending all your money on every Comic-Con convention, you might have a problem. There's many good things that the world can distort into ways to just keep us going as part of the system and consuming. So we have the opportunity in our conversations and in our lives to awaken people to a possibility that life can be more than this. But on the other side of this, the world does recognize and speak against some of these shallow things. But when it does so, right now in Bible Hour, we're talking about various cultic groups and distortions of the Christian faith. There is going to be a deep to pursue, various experiences of world religions, of esoteric knowledge. Oh, let me introduce you to these books that they kept out of the Bible, and here's why, and here's the real truth behind the scriptures. And whether it be magic or even the idea of, hey, everything's winding down, everything's going to collapse. The Western culture, Eastern culture, all of our modern culture is built a foundation of sand, and it's going to collapse. So eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And they're going to have these partial truths that will appeal to people in the world. So if the world, you can either be pulled aside to this shallow life, or you can be pulled aside to something that feels deep but has no reality behind it. We have the opportunity in the everyday, in our conversations, to live that everyday life. I will say this, part of the reason, or one of the ways that I find being involved in the scriptures regularly helpful, is that if you are reading the scriptures regularly, if you're having a conversation and you know you're supposed to be bringing God into things, sometimes, like if you're not spending time in the scripture, you're just finding yourself searching for what bit of truth can I put in here. It can feel very manufactured. And, well, I know I'm supposed to be a witness. Well, what do I say? And there's high pressure and this sort of thing. But if you are finding yourself continually devoting yourself to the Word, making time little by little every day to be taking in the scriptures, you are giving yourself fodder for that whole experience. You're giving yourself material to work from. And I can't tell you how many times that somebody has been talking to me, and it's just conversationally relates to something I read this week in the scriptures. And it's just naturally able to become part of the conversation. Whereas if it's just a distant memory of a Sunday school class back when I was 12, I'm going to have a lot harder time coming up with something to help this person. And it's a manufactured thing anyway. If I really believe this faith, if I really am devoted, then this is going to be part of my life. I want to be reordered by this truth. I want to be satisfied by the God who is indeed satisfying, and I want to share what is indeed living and active in my life. So we have the opportunity, by just interacting as ourselves, as we naturally are involving ourselves in the scriptures and in church life, letting it be who we are. It's not so much work, when we're trying to put on a show and do the life, but we're not putting in the work behind the scenes. That's a lot harder. But when you're actually just believing and living and letting this be who you are, then it's going to come forth. So be aware of opportunities for directing people's attention deeply inward and infinitely outward. Yes. Is the modern world built on a castle of sand? I think so. There are many things that are wrong in the world, but there's a context. I can put it in the story. I can connect them with the reality of what God has done in history and show them that there is a point to this. I can show them that there is a point to everyday life. There is deep meaning both personally and cosmically in everything that we are doing. So we have the opportunity to direct people's attention deeply inward and infinitely outward. When we do so, we are unleashing them from the shackles of the everyday and also helping them to live that everyday with meaning. So we've left the Jewish leaders here crying out for Barabbas, this upside-down world where they're wanting to condemn Jesus but take this insurrectionist and let him go free. Verse 19, then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but John, in his account, is just very succinct in saying that this happened. But this flogging would have been familiar to his original reader, so I'll take just a little bit to emphasize what this was. This wasn't just a spanking with some red marks and maybe a little blood. This is strands of leather embedded with sharp glass and bone and metal balls. It was meant often to precede crucifixion to make sure that the person was losing enough blood, being weak enough that the crucifixion itself would kill them quickly. This would be an experience where flesh would be ripped and hanging from the victim by the time they were done. There are even accounts of internal organs being visible through the wounds when they were done. So when Pilate gives in and has him flogged, we're going to see that Pilate sees this as part of the step of possibly saving Jesus' life. But it's not a small thing that Pilate has submitted to here. So then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. They came to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you that you may know that I find no guilt in him." It's interesting. He's had this done to him, and he lets the soldiers do this massive abuse, this parody of who Jesus is claiming to be. All the hatred and violence that is on display here. He brings Jesus out, and he is bloody, dressed in this purple and this crown of thorns, just this garish ugliness that we see. And you would think, and Pilate seems to be reasoning this way, it's like he's bringing out this bloody mess and saying, just so you know, I want you to see that I find no guilt in him. It's like he's saying, I know you're pushing this when this man doesn't deserve this. I've given it enough. Be done. I know what's going on here. I've gone this far. Let this be enough. So he says, "See, I am bringing him out to you that you may know that I find no guilt in him." So Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to him, "Behold the man." Another way to say this, we don't use the word behold very often. You could also phrase this, "Look at the man." He seems to be appealing to the Jews' humanity here. Say, "Look at the man." And the expectation should be that you see this and you realize the reality of what you're doing. You feel compassion, you feel guilt, you just feel that deep feeling in the pit of your stomach of, oh, look what mankind is capable of. But when they see him, Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he has made himself the Son of God." And he has. And the question is he? And they're not even going to consider that possibility. Again, because Yahweh is who we say he is. And this man doesn't appear like the Yahweh that we imagine. Therefore, he cannot be this. When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. He entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" Now, it's not clear here why this made Pilate afraid. Tiberius, now some options are, I mean, he just could be going with the general idea of this man being a son of a god. You know, he's a Roman. He believes in multiple gods and demigods and this sort of thing. He may just be like, oh man, I'm on the wrong side of Hercules. You know, this sort of idea. But it also could be somewhat political, because you've got Tiberius Caesar himself had put out coins pointing out that he is Tiberius Caesar. You know, he's the son of Augustus. He's the son of the divine Augustus. So he himself has used the term of the Son of God. Well, that's Jesus could be seen as an insurrectionist, you know, against Caesar. And again, Pilate's not looking to be on the wrong side of Caesar. So whatever his motivation is here, this freaks him out. When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. And I think because he asked, "Where are you from?" I think he's getting this sort of supernatural idea in his head. But he entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" Well, Jesus is not answering. I mean, obviously, he's a bloody mess. He's not in good physical condition. But he has also just experienced extreme injustice at Pilate's hand. Pilate said, "I think this guy's innocent," and he's still torn him. And Jesus has not answered him. And it's when Pilate appeals to his authority. "Don't you know?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all, unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." It's interesting to me that at this point, the first sentence could be expected. You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above. Ha ha, smack down, Pilate. You know, you only have that authority because God's given it to you. But then he follows it with this second sentence of, "Therefore he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." And some have suggested he's talking about Judas. Well, if he's going far enough back, it could be Judas. But he could be talking about Caiaphas. You know, he's actually the one that's handing him over to Pilate. Jesus is putting Pilate in the perspective of the overall. It's like you didn't choose this position to get me. You're just the one in this position. Someone else really did see this, it was part of the plot, and made this happen, wanted this to happen, and are using you to make this happen. So Jesus is, and what struck me as I was on a walk yesterday was Jesus is being really precise in his judgment towards Pilate, talking about relative guilt in this context in which Pilate is just trampling all over righteousness to try to get out of this mess with the Jews. Pilate's being unjust. And even in his trying to get Jesus freed and appease the Jews, he's being unjust towards Jesus. Jesus is suffering this injustice from the Jews, but through the hand of Pilate. And even in talking about Pilate's own sin, Jesus provides a corrective to him, but then also says, you know, there are people who are worse than you. There's a bad guy. He's giving Pilate this verbal opportunity to do the right thing, to join the good versus the bad. There's a common enemy that we could be fighting here. Point number 2, when facing injustice, keep speaking the truth in love. The juxtaposition of mercy and precision of judgment can be a jarring wake-up call. Again, when facing injustice, keep speaking the truth in love. The juxtaposition of mercy and precision of judgment can be a jarring wake-up call. You know, some people look at Christians who are being kind, and if we are specifically being kind to people that don't deserve it, in a sense, it's often been the case that I've seen people are assuming that Christians are Pollyannas who just view everything as like, you know, you're only treating me nice because you're too stupid to know that I'm actually working behind your back and being mean to you. You know, if you really knew what I was like, you wouldn't love me. If you really knew what I was like, you wouldn't be investing yourself in my life. There's a song that goes, "No one would love me if they knew all the things I hide." Well, what if we're people who do see the injustice, do call out the injustice, but love them anyway? when we see sinners, we are called to represent the truth. And there are times when we are calling out sin for what it is. But we are not being like the world and saying, you did something I hate, or you've done something against me, kill yourself. Go to hell. We are saying, you are doing evil against me. You are doing evil out in the world. I don't want you to go to hell. I want you to come with me. I want you to join me. We're fighting a greater enemy. Come join the good side. Silly illustration here of this having injustice done against you, but coming at it with mercy and precision of judgment. My brother Sam and I, my older brother Sam and I were, I guess I was probably junior high and he was high school, somewhere around there. I don't remember the exact timing, but old enough to know better. We were standing in front of the bathroom sink, and believe it or not, we were working on combing our hair. And both of us have a lot less time doing that than we used to. But, and if you can believe this, I was, poking the bear, sort of. I found myself in the position of having said something a bit insulting, or I don't remember the exact conversation, but I was being a jerk. And you know, sometimes you can say something that's mean, and there's back and forth, and the opportunity opens, and it's not only is it mean, but it's spot on in something they're proud of, and it really hurts, and it's funny. And if you can get that all together, there's this really guilty, good feeling that comes from that. And boy, I hit him with a zinger. Like I've been, it's like that powder keg, and it's like on the cartoons when you see the thing, it's puffing and puffing and puffing until finally, boom! You know, it's like I was just pumping it up and pumping it up. All of a sudden, I let that one fly. And Sam is a very gentle person. I don't remember any other time in my life that he ever had any sort of violent tendencies towards me at all. And we're three brothers. You'd expect there to be more of that. But all of a sudden, bam! He had pushed me up against the wall. But it wasn't just bam, it was bam, bam. He had pushed me up against the towel rack. And we found out in that moment that the towel rack had been mounted to simple drywall rather than to studs. And it had shoved through the wall. And we turned around, and we're both, all of a sudden, the conflict between ourselves was very small. And it was like, oh no. Because not only did it go through the wall wasn't a painted wall, it was a wallpapered wall, and it had ripped the paper, and we were instantly thinking, there's no quick fix, there's no spackle over this, install, match the paint, there's nothing, it's just a mess. And so I had to tell Mom. I don't think Dad was there at the moment, but by the time Dad found out, I mean, we both had this experience of fear. We know that Dad loved us, but we also knew that he loved us consistently, and as much as a man can do. And sometimes that love included proper correction, and we were a little fearful of that love. And so when the time came for Dad to address us about it, we expected, we were afraid. But Dad was very calm. He's like, well, the way I figure it, you all broke it, and y'all are going to learn how to fix it, and you're going to pay for it. And so he taught us some woodworking, he taught us some staining, we learned how to mount this, and we fixed the problem. So in this situation, Dad was very consistent with his judgment, but it was in a sense, it was scarier to be shown his mercy. There wasn't any big punishment beyond we had to spend the time that was involved and the money that was involved in making restitution for this problem. So we ended up making a nice sort of big wooden thing to cover the whole spot, and then mounted the towel rack on the nicely decorated wooden thing. It might still be there for all I know, and it's a house that's been sold since then. But little do they know the story behind that. But the point is that made an impression upon us. That Dad could have thrown down the gavel, and we really could have faced really bad punishment. But instead, he turned it into a learning opportunity. And we never had that problem again. So when facing, and I wanted to say this, the injustice part of this, I mean, those of you who are dads probably have experienced this. Dad often would work 10-hour days, and sometimes on day shifts, sometimes on evening shift. It's going back and forth. You come home and you hear, oh, by the way, there's a big mess in the bathroom. Oh. And the thought has got to be going through the head of like, I spend all of this time. And let's associate me with the Pharisees here. My kids are in church 3 times a week. I pay for them to go to a private Christian school. Of anybody out there, I was the one that was supposed to know not to use his words for evil against his brother, and Sam was the one to know not to return physical blows for evil words. We should have known this. But sin is sin, and sin is insane, and this is what we do. We follow our fleshly desires, even when we know better. But we're thankful for a God who has shown us mercy, a God who points out our sins, puts them on display, tells us how it is. We need to hear this. But then he sacrifices Jesus to take that punishment, and then gives us the Holy Spirit to transform us, to make us part of the solution. He takes us from the kingdom of darkness and transfers us into the kingdom of his beloved Son. So when facing injustice, keep speaking the truth in love. The juxtaposition of mercy and precision of judgment can be a jarring wake-up call. And so he's given Pilate these opportunities to hear, to plainly understand, you are one piece in this whole setup. You have the opportunity to do what's right, but Pilate as we see, is not going to take him up on this. Around this time, somewhere close to this, his wife actually will come out and she says, Matthew 27:19 records this. She says, have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream. So not a main point, but let's say another point. Listen to your spouses. Take input from your spouses. It was there. It was there for Pilate. And again, note this. I joke about that. But this is another step of mercy. There's another opportunity for Pilate. Jesus has been giving him deep thoughts that he can contemplate. But he's finding himself in this political mess and trying to figure out how to save his own skin when Jesus is saying, how about we talk about me? How about you understand your real place in all of this? And how about you're right. I mean, Pilate's got a negative view of the Jews. It's wrong of him to have that racist sort of mentality, but towards these particular Jewish leaders, Pilate seems to see them for the deceptive group of people that they are. He knows he's being played. Well, he has the chance to stand up and do something amazing. But as we see, he goes and just continues to play the political game. Verse 12, from then on, Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, if you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar. And this is the thing. Pilate's on thin ice. He doesn't want to be seen as opposing Caesar. So when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Stone Pavement, in an Aramaic Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the Jews, behold your king. They cried out, away with him! Away with him! Crucify him! Pilate said to them, shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, we have no king but Caesar. Hear those words. We have no king but Caesar. Jesus Christ, the anointed king, has come. And they've said, we don't want this. We will take the Roman boot and settle for the power that we have. We have no king but Caesar. So he delivered him over to be crucified. Last main point is this. Embrace the eternal divine perspective, lest you yourself fall for the lies of the everyday. Again, embrace the eternal divine perspective, lest you yourself fall for the lies of the everyday. Pilate has given in to these Jews that he knows to be in error. He knows Jesus is innocent, but he's willing to sacrifice Jesus to save his own skin. And the Jews have deluded themselves into seeing themselves as doing God's work. They want rid of Jesus. Jesus is going to take things away from them. Jesus
Jesus minimizes their power. He doesn't match their expectations. They want him out of the way. They are both existing in a reality that they have created for themselves. And they are going to live in such a way as to preserve their everyday, preserve what they have. They've worked hard to get to the position where they're at, and they want to keep it through any means possible. So embrace the eternal divine perspective, lest you yourself fall for the lies of the everyday. I have a real love-hate relationship with politics, and you can see from this passage, there's, the politics continues along the same track that it always has been. When power is up for grabs, it brings both people who are good-hearted and wanting to do what's right, and people who are wanting simply to enjoy the power. It brings them together, and it's just this ugly, explosive mix. It's a necessary thing, and I'm thankful for people who pursue it and pursue God's calling on their life to do it. But one of the things that I hate about it is that we tend to think that out there's this pure white hat wearing hero. It's like we think Jesus is on the ballot each time that we vote. And we can take this out and put it in whatever government system and whatever country you're in. We want to go live as Christians, and the easy thing is if there's just somebody that's awesome that we can go after. And because we want that, there's a tendency for us to want to manufacture that, and we start to view reality as if there is that. When I was in, I'm not going to tell you how old I was. I don't know if I want to nail down which candidate I was talking about. But there was a period of my life where I was really fretting over this, and I was just looking at the field of candidates and just being like, what a mess. And we had gone to I had the opportunity to go to a rally for a particular candidate, and I planned on voting for the person, and I really wanted them to win. But the crowd that I was sitting in, you would think it was like the teenage girls at the Elvis concert. They're just, you'd think the Messiah was here again. Just elated and just overjoyed at the idea of getting to be in the presence of this politician giving their speech. And I found the whole thing distasteful. And so I was talking to a friend, and he was older than me and more learned in these things, more well-read in politics and all of this. And he said, Mark, it would be a lot easier for you spiritually and mentally if you would. He says, there's the whole story of the carriage driver, and you want to get the carriage. There's the one driver who will, to prove his prowess, is, I can get as close to the cliff. I can get within a foot of the cliff. I can get 6 inches towards the cliff and still keep you safe. And the whole point of the parable was that you want to get the driver who doesn't get close to the cliff at all, stays close away from the cliff. He says, you don't need to think about politics that way. He says, you need to think about politics as if you're being forced to get into a carriage. You have no choice. There's a group of carriages, and they're all racing towards the cliff. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to try to find the slowest horse. And I thought, that's it. I don't have to look at this reality and manufacture it so that I have an easy way. I get to call it what it is, and I get to make choices based on those that are in front of me. So we're supposed to be the people, as Jesus has said earlier, that Jesus is the truth, and everyone who is of the truth listens to him. So sometimes we're going to look out and we're going to have easy choices. Other times it's going to be really difficult, and we're going to say it's all messed up. Well, guess what? We live in a messed up world. But the interesting thing about that, and the comforting thing about this, is that God is able to take the sin of Pilate, the sin of the Jewish leadership, all of this mess, and he turns it into his own victory over sin at the cross. God is able to take the mess of reality that we need to be mature enough in Christ to call what it is. He's able to take that and do something beautiful with it. And that leaves us moment by moment with the responsibility. We're preparing for the future, but we're also just looking for the next right thing to do. So because when we've embraced that eternal, divine perspective, it keeps us from trying to transform life into being something more appealing. So embrace the eternal, divine perspective, lest you fall for the lies of the everyday. So let's review these points, and we'll conclude with a little short statement. I'm almost done. So number one, be aware of opportunities for directing people's attention deeply inward and infinitely outward. Unleash them from the shackles of the everyday. Number 2, when facing injustice, keep speaking the truth in love. The juxtaposition of mercy and precision of judgment can be a jarring wake-up call. And lastly, embrace the eternal, divine perspective, lest you yourself fall for the lies of the everyday. So, Israel's leaders declared the kingship of Caesar. We've left him here in this last passage. Israel's leaders declare the kingship of Caesar, leading a Gentile ruler to fall for the temptation of slaying an innocent man. He sees through their fake religion, but still fakes his own way through the justice system to save his own skin. Mankind fails, but in Christ, Israel's true leader shows the way of loving faithfulness and self-giving sacrifice. And God uses even this extremely sinful situation to bring about the salvation of the world, bringing peace to both Jew and Gentile, and bringing them together in the church. God is sovereign. He will make use even of our sins, but woe to those who take this route. For those who reject the one true God, judgment will fall, and it will indeed be fair down to the smallest detail. How much more glorious and joyous to follow Jesus, to walk in forgiveness through faith in him, to be faithful to our divine appointments, living in the image of God, participating in his work of new creation. Let us pray. God our Father, we thank you for including us in this work of new creation. We thank you that though you've seen our sin